So you're trying to change your body composition. Like most people, you're probably trying to build up a little bit of muscle, drop a little bit of body fat, and overall change the way your physique looks. Now, most people's goals are some variation along that sort of theme. Generally, it's build a little bit more muscle and drop a little bit more body fat. But when you are sculpting that muscle in the gym, you're grinding away with the iron, lifting weights in multiple different directions, are you actually turning that fat into muscle? Is that the actual process that's happening? Or is it something that's completely different that's going on within your body that's creating that body composition change? That's what we're going to be talking about in today's episode of the show. But before we launch into that, as always, there is some free shit that you can get your hands on just for being an avid listener of this show. So what you can do right now is click the link in the show notes below that will give you free access to my online calorie and macro calculator. Now, why would you want to use that, you might ask? Well, part of this process is going to be about managing your nutrition. So if you do want to drop those few pounds of body fat, maybe you want to get rid of that stubborn fat around your midsection, you are going to need to be in a calorie deficit. And understanding where your calorie deficit is the first step in that process. So I've got this free online calorie calculator. It'll take you less than 60 seconds to put in the information you need that will then spit out a calorie target for you to follow that's going to get you right on the way to achieving your goals. Plus, it'll tell you how much protein and all of that sort of good stuff that you can actually eat in order to achieve your goals. But not only that, once you've used the calorie calculator, the fun doesn't stop there. Once you have access to the calorie calculator, I'll send you a free guide on calories and macros. I'll send you a free training program, a guide on managing cravings, free recipe packs, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So make sure you hang around for that. That's all in the link in the show notes below. But for now, let's get on with our episode all about muscle turning into fat. Or is something else going on? The simple answer to the exam question is no. Muscle is not a process whereby you're taking fat and then turning it into rock solid butt cheeks. That is not really what's happening. You're not turning flabby pecs into that kind of Batman-like suit of armor that you're trying to shape. That's not really what's happening. Dropping body fat and building muscle are two completely separate processes that are happening in the body. So let's discuss each one of those so you're a little bit more clear on the whole situation. First up, building muscle, making the gains. When you are lifting weights in the gym, basically you are constantly challenging that muscle. That good old phrase of progressive overload is what you're seeking. So when you are challenging those muscles, you're making them work, you're maybe making them push a little bit harder than they did last time, whether that's through a few extra repetitions, maybe it's from extra sets, maybe it's from a little bit more focus on good form, maybe it's just lifting a fuck ton more weight. But over the course of time, you are challenging those muscles. You are progressively overloading what those muscles are doing over the course of a period of time. Now, what you're then going to do is the protein you consume then kind of, in a real simplistic terms, makes the most of that training. It helps you to adapt. Your muscles get stronger, bigger, they repair, all that sort of good stuff. And that's what the process is of building that muscle. Your actual body fat doesn't come into the equation. The two main components of building muscle are going to be the training element, because without that need for growth, that stimulus in order to adapt and change, nothing will happen. So you can eat all the protein you like and basically you won't build that much muscle because you are not challenging your muscles, you're not challenging your body. But when you add in resistance training with protein, then you are getting this sort of perfect storm for making gains. You are creating the need to adapt, and you're using the protein as the mechanism to adapt and grow and build muscle. So that's the first part of the equation. Nothing to do with your body fat whatsoever. It's just derivative of mainly resistance training and protein. Now, fat loss can occur at the same time as building muscle, but it's through a completely separate process. Now, Fat loss comes from the creation of a calorie deficit. So you are consuming fewer calories than your body is burning on a daily basis. That's essentially what needs to take place. So if you look at the flip side of that, you could be at calorie maintenance, you could be in a calorie deficit or in a calorie surplus. And as long as you're doing the training and the protein bit and you're challenging the muscles, you can still build muscle at any of those different energy states. As you get a little bit more advanced, a little bit more experienced, building muscle in a deficit becomes incredibly hard. So that's why, generally speaking, most of the time you will hear that it's more optimal to do that at maintenance or in a calorie surplus. But you could still technically build muscle in a calorie deficit because these two processes aren't really linked. Now, where training could help in terms of the calorie deficit process is that obviously training, movement, is helping to some degree create that calorie deficit. Now, I would never advise you to use training as the sole driver of creating that calorie deficit. It's probably a very inefficient and ineffective way to go about it. So that's why if you're not looking after your nutrition and all you're doing is bucket loads of cardio, you're probably not going to get the results that you want because it doesn't burn as many calories as you probably think it does. It may lead to some compensatory behaviors that may impact your energy balance equation. By that, I mean, you might be so tired after all that cardio, you actually move less during the day, so you take less overall steps. That affects the amount of calories you burn. You may also have an increased level of hunger and appetite, which causes you to overeat. So generally speaking, just training alone is not an optimal way to go about losing body fat, but you are burning calories, so it does have a contributory effect. So you are burning fat through the process of a calorie deficit. You are building muscle through resistance training and protein intake. So they are two separate processes. You're not actually converting fat into muscle. What's happening when you see those changes in your body is effectively this recomposition process whereby your body fat is reducing by that adherence to a calorie deficit, and at the same time, potentially in the right circumstances, your muscle mass is increasing over the course of time through progressive overload, through the training, and through the right amount or an adequate amount of protein. So that's essentially what's happening in the body. It's not this process of converting fat into muscle. So don't think of it like that. So hopefully that answered the question that might have been rolling around your head and why you clicked on this video. If it did, I would love to hear about it over on Instagram. That's where I hang out the most. So if you go to @iron_paradise_fitness, I will put a link in the show notes below. You can DM me if you want to. I always love it when people tag me in a story. Maybe you take a screenshot of you listening to this episode, maybe even a selfie, who knows, tag me in it. Always glad to see those pictures and those stories because that helps me see, how far is this podcast spreading? That's pretty awesome. And as I mentioned right at the beginning, if you need to get into that calorie deficit and you need to figure out how much protein you're having, use that free online calorie calculator and plus get all the free shit that you get after that as well. But for now, all I'm going to say is thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for watching. Keep living the lean life and I'll see you for the next episode of the show.